Tee. Welcome to the 2019 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series where your man Louie Tee aims to break down all 32 teams in the National Football League's 2019 NFL Draft using our baseball grading scale. Single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up Series because we cannot tell how these players are going to pan out, and I don't want to discount any of these young men before they get their chance in the National Football League. And so we'll get a score for each and every single player selected in said team's draft. We'll apply bonuses when necessary, get an aggregate score, divide by the number of picks, which will yield us an overall grade for that team's draft. We'll then move on to the next team in the series picked by you. That's right, you, the viewer, are in total control. If this is the You Pick format, simply be the first to leave a comment in the comment section of this and future videos in this series stating two things: the phrase you'd like, the phrase next, and the team you'd like to see next. And some examples would be Bears next, Chicago next, Dub Bears. You get where I'm going with this. As a matter of fact, the next team up in the series is none other than the Bears, Chicago Bears, who had a tremendous 2018 season. It ended on a sour note with a missed field goal in Wild Card Weekend, but that does not take away from the dramatic leap that they made a season ago. Now looking to build upon that, this is a team moving in the right direction. GM Ryan Pace putting together a very compacted draft, obviously on the heels of the trading for Khalil Mack last offseason. Not a ton of draft capital. As a matter of fact, the Bears didn't make their first selection until the third round of this draft. So every single pick was going to have to matter and count for the Bears. And I thought they actually did a really good job of maximizing their selections. Ryan Pace has always made it a habit of not reaching for football players, not reaching for need, but rather taking the best player available on the board at the time of the selection. I think he did exactly that in this draft. They kind of had overkill at certain positions, but again, you can't go wrong when you add talented football players to your roster. And even though these positions were positions of need, they didn't need two players at each of these respective positions. But again, when the talent is there, it's hard to pass up. And so they just went with the best player available at their selection, especially when you get into the later rounds. You're not looking to fit needs. You fit needs with best player available towards the top of the draft, if at all possible. But at the tail end of a draft, you're just looking for talent. You're looking for the best player available on your board because, again, you're looking for guys that can make your football team, not necessarily looking to fill a need at that point. So you're hoping that that player with the talent that's the highest available on your board also meets a need. But if that's not the case, you still take them because, again, talented football players win the day in this league, irregardless of position. And so the Bears, I thought, did a quality job with only 5 selections of really getting more talented football players to add to what is becoming a very good roster in the Windy City. So let's talk about what they were able to do with their 5 picks in the 2019 NFL Draft. And we start with the third round selection of a guy that was one of my favorite players in this draft. If you've watched me for any amount of time during this draft process, if you've listened to me on the podcast, Louie Tee Network podcast, available on Stitcher, Google Music Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, and of course the website LouieTeeNetwork.net. If you've listened to me at any point during the NFL Draft or before leading up to it, talking running backs, then you know how I feel about this next player. But this is one of the best players, not just at the running back position, but overall in this draft, probably one of the most underrated prospects in this draft class. Of course, I'm talking about running back out of Iowa State, David Montgomery, who the Bears took 73rd overall in the third round of the NFL Draft to get their draft underway. So for me, this is a no-brainer. I love this selection for the Bears. I've talked about this player in particular ad nauseum leading up to the draft and how I feel like if he had speed, he would have been, no doubt in my mind, a second round for sure. I thought he was a second round prospect either way. Without the speed, I thought he would have been a first round pick for sure if he could run faster, but that's nor here nor there. Everyone else's loss is the Bears' gain here in the third round with the selection of David Montgomery. As you can see on the screen, I have what I deem to be the Bears' biggest needs coming into the draft. I have them in sequential order of the needs that are the most apparent for me going into the draft. We may disagree on what's the most important needs for the Bears, but these are the needs that I have coming into the draft. Running back, obviously, they met that need. As a matter of fact, let's take that off of the board right now, as they've taken care of what I deem to be their most important position of need coming into the draft. Why? Yeah, they went out and got Mike Davis in the offseason from Seattle, but you also got rid of Jordan Howard in that production. He wasn't the guy that necessarily fit in Matt Nagy's offense, and so they were looking to move on last offseason, if you remember, but it finally came to fruition this offseason. He's gone. He was shipped off to Philadelphia, and so, yeah, you got Mike Davis. Obviously, you have Tariq Cohen, one of the most dynamic football players in the entire league, but there's not much there after that. And so there needed to be more additions to that running back group. Mike Davis is a guy that has been injured in Seattle, so you needed to have more depth at that position. And also, I thought that you needed to maybe even explore options to back up Tariq Cohen. What if he goes down? He's such a dynamic player and such a focal point and big part of your offense. What happens if he goes down with an ankle for 2 or 3 weeks? Do you have someone that can back him up? And they actually took care of that in this draft as well. We'll talk about that when we get there. But in any event, that was my number one need, running back in this draft. Then edge rusher, I think that's something you need to explore. Obviously, you've got a couple of guys you like in Khalil Mack and Gumby. But after those two, who do you really have confidence coming off the edges? I never was a Kylie Fitz guy. I told you that when you drafted him. I think that Aaron, the ex-49er, Aaron, I can't think of his last name, but he's a guy that runs hot and cold for me. You know, I really liked him at points in San Francisco. He came to Chicago following Vic Fangio, looking for a fresh start after having some good seasons in San Francisco, but really not maximizing his talents. I think he's on his last year of his deal here in Chicago. I really don't know what you have behind him. And so I just thought that edge rusher was something you could explore in this potential draft. Also, safety. Yeah, you got HaHa Clinton-Dix, added him to the roster in the offseason, but you lost Adrian Amos to the Green Bay Packers. And so I think you only have 3 or 4 safeties on your roster at this point that could make the roster. It might be like realistically 3 guys that you really like at the safety position right now. Obviously, with these 90-man rosters right now, it's the roster is inflated, but I think you got 3 guys that legitimately could play football for you on Sundays at the safety position. That's not enough. You at a minimum, you have to have 4. So I thought safety was a position that maybe you needed to explore potentially. Maybe you like some guys that you've been working with, and maybe you feel comfortable at the safety position. We'll see. Cornerback, obviously, is another position that you need to look at. I think you have about 3 corners right now that you feel good about, maybe 4, but in this league, you can't have enough corners. Just like you can't have enough edge rushers, you can't have enough corners in this league. And so you lost a big-time nickel in this offseason, and he moved on to Denver. You're going to need to replace his production and his play. And so I thought nickel was a big priority in this draft potentially, and just more depth at the position in general. Tight end, you've had some injuries at the tight end position. You don't have stability there. Deion Sims was released in the offseason, and he was a disappointment anyway. Adam Shaheen is coming off of an injury. So you look at what this team has at the tight end position, you don't have a lot, essentially. And so I thought that was something you could explore. But by the time you got on the board, I think tight end wasn't at the top of your list. And again, the value of getting a guy like David Montgomery was just too hard to pass up at this point. And really, after the 3rd round, you started getting into those next tier tight ends. I don't know if you were interested in doing that at that point. And you see how far I have tight end down the list of needs. So there were other positions that superseded tight end. And maybe you feel good about Shaheen coming off the injury, and you feel good about the position as a whole. And then wide receiver, I just felt like you needed more depth at receiver, but more importantly, I felt like you needed more size. When I look at the receivers that you have on your roster, I see a bunch. I see Allen Robinson and a bunch of small guys. Now, you added Cordero Patterson in the offseason. He gives you a little bit of size, but he's more of a gadget guy. He's more of an ancillary piece at the receiver position. He's not a guy you're looking to feature. He's a guy you're looking to just try to get the football into his hands and move him around as somewhat of a chess piece, use him on special teams as a return man, which is what he's carved out a niche for in this league. And so you're not looking at him as a viable option to throw the football to 50, 60 times a season. You needed another guy with some size out wide. And you look at all the guys you have on this roster, Marvin Hall and the likes of your second round pick last year, a guy that I really loved at the receiver position out of Memphis. All of these guys are smaller, diminutive wide receivers. I just felt like you needed to infuse a little bit more size. And so I like Javon Wims. I told you I thought you got to steal in the 7th round last year with Javon Wims out of Georgia. You went to the Georgia well yet again. And I think you've gotten an even better wide receiver this year. And so we'll talk about that here in a second. But those are the needs for the Bears. Let's jump into how they addressed them via the draft. Obviously, David Montgomery, the first selection in the draft in the 3rd round, 73rd overall pick. Love this guy. Love what he brings to the table. I'm not going to break him down here. I've already done that on the Draft Prospects 101 series. So if you're looking for a thorough breakdown of David Montgomery and what he brings to the table, check out my series, 2019 NFL Draft Prospect 101 series on the Louie Tee Network. And just go to the playlist section. You'll find it there. All the players I was able to get to prior to the draft. He was one of them. It was a joy watching his tape. It was so much fun. I broke it down, film, all of that stuff. Gave you all the reasons why I think he was a guy that should have come off the board in the 2nd round. You get him here in the 3rd. You should feel fortunate to have gotten the kind of value you got with this selection. He's going to come right in. To me, he's going to start. He's going to get Ullman-like work. Him and Tariq Cohen, to me, are going to be your number 1 and 2 options. You're going to feature Mike Davis as a 3rd option, I believe. And then I think a guy that you drafted later on in this draft also is going to find his way onto the football field eventually as well. So I think you've got a healthy group at the running back position, and you're adding to it. And I think you really bolstered it here in the 3rd round with a guy like David Montgomery, 73rd pick overall out of Iowa State. David Montgomery, you already know what this is.
Hits it high. Hits it deep. It is out of here.
You got to love when a plan comes together. I comped him to Kareem Hunt in my breakdown and assessment of him. And obviously, Kareem Hunt, Kansas City, the connection to Matt Nagy, and what Kareem Hunt was for that offense. It's not hard to tell why this was a no-brainer pick for the Bears and why they liked him and what he will bring to the table for them. It's phenomenal value here in the 3rd round. Let me just overstate that again. 4th round, though, 126th pick overall. A wide receiver out of Georgia, Calvin Ridley. You know him as Riley Ridley is the pick. So you know him as Riley Ridley, but his name is Calvin Ridley. But in order to not confuse him with his brother, who is Calvin Ridley, he just goes by his middle name, Riley. So makes a lot of sense because it would be easy to confuse Calvin with Calvin. And so this is a really good pick here. Again, this is great value. I had no expectations for the Bears in the 4th round. None. I said, there's no way you're coming away with tremendous value at this point of the draft at the receiver position. Maybe at a different position. Maybe at tight end, you might still be able to get value. Maybe at safety, which there was still value at the time in the draft in the 4th round. But you're not coming away with tremendous value at wide receiver. It's just not going to happen. There's going to be a run on receivers in the 2nd round that's going to leak over into the 3rd. And by the time you get on the board, there's not going to be anything left but table scraps. I was wrong. You got yourself a really good receiver here in the 4th round. And so 6'1", 199 pounds, 33-inch arms, ran a 4.58, which was a little disappointing at the combine, but we knew he wasn't going to blaze the combine, okay? I was hoping for 4.52, something like that, closer to 4.4, but 4.58 is perfectly fine because he's a guy that does all of the other things exceptionally well. So he's not the same receiver as his brother. His brother's a little shorter, brother's a lot faster, And he's a lot bigger, and he is a lot more physical than his brother. So you take what you can get, and let's break him down quickly. So Riley Ridley isn't his brother Calvin, who went in the first round last year out of Alabama to the Falcons, but he outshined him when their two respective teams faced off in the 2017 national title game. In Riley Ridley comes a precise route runner who can make contested catches with a long frame to offer a wider than normal catch radius. While speed isn't his forte, Riley has enough of it to be a threat at the next level. Every now and again, he'll let one slip through the wickets, but his hands are strong, and so is his run after the catch. I don't foresee number one wide receiver in his future, but he's a damn good number two option. To me, he's one of those guys that you can rely on 3rd and 7. You can throw it to him in a contested situation and expect him to come down with the football. You can expect him to separate. He knows how to run routes. I think that just runs in their family. Him and his brother run such crisp and precise routes. It's not even funny. When they stick their foot in the ground, they stick their foot in the ground. It's very, very sharp, their cuts. They come in and out of breaks very hard, which is very deceptive to corners because they're opening up their hips thinking that these guys are taking them vertically, and then they come back to the football. He's one of those guys that you just know is going to run his route in rhythm and timing, come out of that break, and he's going to separate. And even if he doesn't, he's got strong enough hands to come down with the football in a contested situation. Got a nice large catch radius because of his longer arms and his long frame pause. And so with all of those things, you get a package that, to me, gives the Bears exactly what I thought they needed: another bigger weapon out wide at the receiver position. You've got a lot of guys that are smaller. I talked about Miller already. I talked about Hall and all of the smaller guys that you already have at the receiver position. You needed to infuse a little bit of size. You did that here with Riley Ridley. Love this selection. Love it. Think it's exactly what you needed. And to get this kind of value, you should feel very fortunate here in the 4th round. My comp for him is Robert Woods, the wide receiver out in L.A. with the Rams, who is tearing shit up for the Rams right now. And I don't think the Bills actually knew what they had in Robert Woods when they allowed him to test free agency. And you're seeing what Robert Woods brings to the table. And I think you can get a lot of what the Rams are getting out of Woods here in Riley Ridley in the 4th round. And so you should feel really good about this selection. Let's take wide receiver off the board of needs, as you've met another need for this Bears draft. Here in the 4th round, 126th pick overall, wide receiver out of Georgia. Riley Ridley, for me, is So now we move on to the 6th round, 205th pick overall, defensive back out of K-State. Yaquise Duke Shelley is the pick. So Duke Shelley is the selection in the 6th round for the Bears as they attack another need in this draft. Let's take corner off the board. That was a need that I thought you had to address at some point and add more depth at the position. Like I said, you lost your nickel in free agency, and I really like Bryce Callahan a ton. So he's a guy that moved on to Denver. And I thought that you needed to at least attack cornerback with some kind of aggressiveness during the course of this draft. And in the 6th round, it's not as aggressive as I would have liked, maybe in the 4th round. But again, Riley Ridley was value. You just couldn't pass up in the 4th round. So I don't blame the Bears for doing what they've done with their first 2 picks in this draft. That was tremendous value in both of those selections. And so here in the 6th round, this is the first opportunity you had to maybe select a corner, and you liked what Duke Shelley brought to the table. So let's talk about what he is as a football player. 5'9", 173 pounds. This is a guy that when you watch him on tape, he jumps off at you as a feisty competitor, a guy that is always around the football, a guy that is contesting everything. Nothing is, to me, a given, a gimme. He's not allowing you to catch the underneath route without him being there trying to break it up. He had a pick versus Oklahoma State, and I watched him in that game, and he was exceptional in that game. And as a matter of fact, ironically, it was his last game of his career at K-State. He actually tore a ligament in his toe in that game, but he had 2 interceptions in that game and actually tore it on the final interception that he had in that game. But he made a play in that game where he's beaten deep on a play. Doesn't look back for the football, and that's a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, but I think at that point he felt like he was beaten to the point where he didn't have a chance to look back. Nonetheless, the receivers got the football. This guy is so scrappy. He's reaching, he's clawing, he's scratching, and all of a sudden, somehow, he's able to just take the football away from that receiver in the end zone for a touchback. And that's what Duke Shelley essentially is. And to me, that's a microcosm of who this guy is as a football player. A feisty, undersized corner that was essentially a 4-year starter at K-State. Despite his size, Shelley challenges everything, okay? That includes ball carriers, no matter the size, and wide receivers. While his size will force him inside as a nickel, his competitiveness, his ball skills, 8 career INTs at K-State, instincts, and physicality will give him a chance to make an NFL roster despite missing the final 5 games of his collegiate career with a torn toe ligament. So this is a guy that I think brings a lot of the qualities that you look for in a nickel. He's got quickness. This guy ran a 4.46 at his pro day, fully healthy from the toe ligament tear. He's a guy that will tackle. I watched him take and scoop a guy that looked like he was every bit of 20 pounds and 2, 3, 4, like maybe 5 inches taller than him, and just scooped him up and dumped him like he was nothing. Like, this guy isn't afraid to be physical. This guy has the movement skill necessary. He drives on the football like nobody's business, which allows him to contest everything. There's a lot to like. He's got instincts. He sees, he reads the field very well, sees what the quarterback's trying to do. There's a lot of good things that he does. Again, his size is a negative. You get a guy with 6'3" size on him, and there's not much he can do if that football is thrown up high. And he's a guy that sometimes won't look back for the football. Not always an LLCer. As you know, I'm a huge LLCer. For those of you not familiar with the vernacular, look, contest, and locate and contest. All right. If you don't look back, you can't locate the football. If you can't locate the football, you can't contest it a lot of times. You can't contest it if you don't look and you just get lucky and you happen to stick your hand in a cookie jar and, oh, look what I found. But generally speaking, you can't locate or contest what you can't locate. So you got to be an LLC or look, locate, contest. And for me, sometimes he's not that guy, but you give him a chance to have eyeballs on quarterback and receiver, and this guy is a problem. And so he brings a lot of good traits to the table despite his size. So here in the 6th round, 205th pick overall, K-State cornerback Duke Shelley for me is and my comp for Duke Shelley is LaMarcus Joyner, the Los Angeles Rams draft pick out of Florida State some 4 years ago, moved on in free agency after receiving a franchise tag. He's now in Oakland with the Raiders, and he's been a very productive football player since hitting the league as a nickel / safety. I see a lot of the same qualities here in your pick, Duke Shelley. A lot of nickel work coming his way if he is up to the task, similar to LaMarcus Joyner. And I think he also plays a physical brand of football similar to LaMarcus Joyner as well. So now we move on to the 7th round. Bears had 2 selections in the 7th round, the first of which 222nd pick overall, running back out of Florida Atlantic, Kyrith White is the selection. So this is a pick to me that stands out and sticks out like a sore thumb. I don't think he should have been here in the 7th round. Now, let me start by saying he should have went back to school. And I don't know his situation, and I don't like to play that game because, again, I don't know what his situation is. I don't know what his financial situation is. I don't know what his family situation is. I don't know if the motive behind this move was, hey, look, we need money and we need it now. I can continue to get better at the next level while getting paid. I don't know what the motivation is here, okay? And so I don't like to play that game. But if you're just talking off of a sheer value perspective and what's best for him from a production standpoint, notoriety standpoint and probably a money standpoint. If you're talking about bigger earnings at a faster rate, he would have made more money going back to school, I believe, because I honestly, I'm saying this. I know it sounds crazy because we're talking about a 7th round pick here, but if he goes back to school, stays healthy at Florida Atlantic, and does what the guy that he was backing up, Motor Singletary, did throughout his career, which is post huge numbers, you might be talking about a 2nd round pick next year. Like that's how big of a jump he could have made if he would have went back to school, because the talent is here. That being said, the talent doesn't change. I think him getting more opportunities, him being more comfortable, him having more experience would have benefited him, but that wouldn't change what this guy is. All right, he's a freak, is what he is. But let's talk about Kerith White and what he brings to the table. I talked about you needing a backup for Tariq Cohen. I feel like David Montgomery and Mike Davis are in that same mold. Obviously, David Montgomery way more talented than Mike Davis. I don't want you to misconstrue that statement. But they're similar in size and they're similar in what they bring to the table. So, in essence, Mike Davis is the backup for David Montgomery when it's all said and done. That's what that's going to ultimately amount to. You don't have a backup, though, a guy that can fit the Tariq Cohen backup role, okay? Enter in Kerith White. And so I think that's why this draft pick is so intriguing here in the 7th round. So let me give you what I've found on Kerith White. So Kerith White needed more time, okay? I've said that already. I mean that if you would have went back to school, this guy's a 3rd round pick, probably 2nd round pick next year, depending on how well he played in his senior season. That being said, his talents weren't displayed enough behind Motor Singletary and would have gotten the chance had he went back to school. That being said, he's a freak. 21 reps of 2 1/4, 4.63 40, 42-inch vert, 11-foot broad. He's everything one can hope for out of a change of pace back. While he sometimes can lack vision or the finesse to make guys miss out in space, his physical, explosive play can offer a bit of pass pro and can catch it out of the backfield, and as an added side benefit, can also return kickoffs, had a touchdown in 2018 on kickoff returns. There's a lot to like with Kerith White. So Kerith White, for me, is a guy that I feel like is going to make your roster. I feel bullish on that. As a 7th round pick, you don't often get to say that a guy's going to make your football team. There's a few guys you can pick out on every, on specific drafts and say, hey, this guy's going to make this football team because of the opportunity at the position, 1, and 2, the talent is undeniable. This guy's going to make your football team. I'm just telling you that right now. You're carrying 4 backs. I don't know if you've carried 4 in the past. I don't know what Matt Nagy's philosophy is on backs. I'd like to think he's a guy that likes to keep his cupboard stocked, chocked, and full of talented football players at the running back position because of what he likes to do with his running backs. That being said, even if he only likes to carry 3, he's carrying 4 this year because you're not going to be able to put Kerith White on the street and expect him to pass through waivers and make it to your practice squad. If you value him, and I think you do, he's going to be on your football team in the upcoming season. So I expect you to carry 4 backs. I think he's going to be your 4th back. And I think this guy has rare talent. Now, it's still undeveloped all the way. I still think he's somewhat raw. And that's why I would have loved him to go back to school to get more experience, pressing the line and being a little bit more patient and setting up blocks. And then maybe even having more of that niche to be able to and itch to make guys miss in space. Right now, he's just running through arm tackles and using his speed to outrun guys. I'd like to see him make people miss. Maybe a lot of times, making people miss is an innate thing. Either you can or you can't. Either you have it or you don't. But I just think that there's more here to be tapped into. And being the 4th guy on the depth chart, it generally doesn't work out for you getting the reps you need to get better. But we'll see. There's a lot of value here in the 7th round. And I'm going to do something I don't do very often. It's very rare that you get this kind of grade in the 7th round. But that's how high I think of and how much I think of Kerith White here in the 7th round. 222nd pick overall. Running back out of Florida Atlantic for me, Kerith White is so my comp for him is Jerick McKinnon. Shh! Don't tell nobody about the secret weapon known is Jerick McKinnon. Remember, he was drafted some 3-4 years ago out of Georgia Southern by the Minnesota Vikings. I called him a secret weapon because he could do a little bit of everything. He ended up moving on to San Francisco in free agency last year towards ACL. They love what he brings to the table. I expect Kyle Shanahan to do wonderful things with him, and I expect Matt Nagy to do the same here with Keurig White over time. So that being said, after Keurig White, you drafted one more player in the 7th round, 238th overall selection. A defensive back out of Valdosta State, Steven Denmark, is the pick. So here, you're taking a 7th round flyer on a height, weight, speed specimen. That's essentially what you're doing here in the 7th round. This guy, when you talk about genetic freaks, you may not find more of a freak in this draft than Steven Denmark here in the 7th round. He's a track guy at 6'3", 220, which is ridiculous size for a corner. I mean, that's safety size, really. That in today's NFL, that's linebacker size, God damn it. I mean, you're seeing linebackers come in the league at 6'1", 220. This guy's 6'3", 220, and he looks the part of a linebacker, plays the position at times like a safety linebacker hybrid. He's only got 1 year of experience. This guy was a converted wide receiver, and generally when you're at a small school, you do whatever you got to do to try to make it to the league. And a lot of times these guys figure out quickly, or I shouldn't say quickly, it usually takes them 2 or 3 years to figure out going into their senior year, man, I don't think I'm going to make it as a receiver. I need to switch positions to maybe give myself a little bit more appeal to these scouts. There's nothing that appealing about a 6'3", 220 wide receiver. There's something damn appealing about a 6'3", 220 corner, though, or a safety. And so that gets people buzzing, talking, and he makes the switch, and it paid off as he gets selected here in the 7th round. So let's talk about him quickly. X-track guy and wide receiver turned height, weight, speed corner. The measurables are off the charts with his size comes linebacker-like physicality, but only 1 year of experience at the cornerback position. The rawness shows as to be expected, and while he's not ready to contribute at cornerback right now, he's worth a late-round flyer to get your hands on a physical freak like Denmark, who at 6'3", 220 runs a 4.43 with a 43.5-inch vert. So you're talking about the kind of physicality yet athleticism that you just don't see every day. As a matter of fact, I don't know if I've ever seen this kind of athleticism in that kind of body at the cornerback position. Now, again, can he play? That's to be seen. I mean, watching him on tape, man, is he super raw. I mean, he'll get up and challenge a guy at the line of scrimmage, but then his footwork to turn and transition is horrendous. Guys are running right by him. Luckily enough for him, these balls are being underthrown because he plays against lackluster competition and quarterbacks, and so he's able to get back into the play. But his transitions aren't where they need to be. His route recognition isn't great at this point. As again, all of these things are to be expected. He's a 1 year starter at cornerback. He's pretty much brand new to the position, so much to learn. He's a guy that's right now a moldable slab of clay. You don't draft him and expect him to come in and contribute right away. He's a guy that you're going to draft and stash away on your practice squad. You're going to work with him over the next year plus, in hopes that he turns into a guy that can ultimately contribute on defense and special teams for you on this roster. But in the meantime, you're going to continue to work with this guy, hopefully mold him into the type of player you want him to be. I do not expect him to make your roster, but stranger things have happened. If he comes along at a much faster rate and rapidly than I'm giving him credit for, maybe he has an outside shot of cracking his roster. I don't see it taking place, though, but this is a guy that in the 7th round, these are the types of guys, I've talked about this numerous times over the years, these are the kind of guys you take in the 7th round. Height, weight, speed specimens, athletes with size, guys that have made conversions to different positions, guys with checkered past and off the field issues, but a rare talent. This is the time you take these types of players, guys with an injury history, but uber talented when on the field and healthy. These are the times you take these types of players. This is a guy making a positional switch with rare size and athletic traits for the position. You take him, you work with him, you see what you can get out of him. And so that's what the Bears are doing here in the 7th round, 228th pick, or excuse me, 238th pick overall. Defensive back out of Valdosta State, Steven Denmark, for me, to wrap up this Bears draft is... So quality stuff here by Ryan Pace and company, man. These guys, to me, did the best they could with the hand that they were dealt, having no first or second round picks. To start your draft in the 3rd round is really tough, but to then get the value that they got in both the 3rd and 4th rounds, I think that they absolutely killed it when they finally got up to bat. And so kudos to them for maximizing the 5 picks that they did have. And hell, you got a 7th round triple. I mean, that's scouting, folks. That's doing your homework when you're able to somehow net a 7th round triple. Those are so rare. And I really believe that Keith White is a guy that has some real potential in this league and some real staying power as well. I think he's going to stick with this roster, and eventually he's going to see the football field, and I think he's going to be productive when he gets his opportunity. So that's the Bears 2019 NFL Draft. Let's look at their score for what they were able to do. So that's the Bears draft wrap up here on the Louie Tee Network. I can't thank you guys enough for joining me here on the show. Make sure you subscribe to the Louie Tee Network if you haven't already done so, as I break down all 32 teams in the National Football League. So don't you go anywhere. Content all year round, 365 here on the Louie Tee Network as we cover the NFL like a blanket. Remember, if it's not your man T, it's not the best NFL coverage it could be. Also, check out the Louie Tee Network podcast. Once again, available on all platforms. Available on Google Music Play, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Spotify, and of course the website LouieTeeNetwork.net. I'm your man Louie T, signing off. Until next time, have a good one.
Louie Tee Network.